Hi folks, my name's Cynthia and welcome to our final episode of the Business Beyond Borders podcast for 2018. This episode marks a year since we started recording, and I've been so privileged to speak to many courageous entrepreneurs from Australia and around the world. Now, every story is different, but what all my guests have in common is that they've successfully launched a business into international markets, often against the odds. I've called today's episode Ridding the World of Death by PowerPoint. And my guest is Lee Featherby, founder and CEO of Powerful Points, which is a company that helps clients to get their message across. And we'll talk about that in more detail in just a little while. Lee has had a pretty quirky and fascinating journey. He's originally from Perth, and he was a ballroom dancing champion by age 12. He was also the first person in Australia to package and sell flavoured milk in a plastic bottle. He became National Marketing Manager for Red Rooster when he was only 26, and all that when he could have just been working at his family's company all along. Lee started Powerful Points in the early 2000s when he moved to Sydney, and he's gone on to take the business to China and soon to the rest of the world. Today, we're going to talk about all those developments. We're going to talk about the early days of running Powerful Points in China, how Lee got his first clients there, and about some of the cultural differences between Chinese and Australian clients and how Lee's dealt with those. Lee, it's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Now, we're going to talk about international business today, but I came across some fantastic stuff as we were, doing research on you. And the most interesting thing that I found out that I have to ask you about is that at age 12, your dad tricked you into learning ballroom dancing. And apparently you were really great at this. So 4 years later, you had 9 state titles across a range of disciplines, and you were also runner-up in the national titles 5 times. How does one's dad trick one into learning ballroom dancing?
I can't remember now. When I was 12 was a long time ago, but I do remember him. Yeah, because this was, I'm sad to say, in the early 70s, where dancing wasn't seen as popular as it is these days. In actual fact, in those days, it was almost you had to learn to dance and to fight because your sexuality was constantly questioned if you danced, which was always unusual for me because I was fortunate enough to go to a private school, which of course, even in WA, where I'm from originally, has a strong rugby union bias to it. And these guys who played rugby would question my motives around the weekend. And I used to say, well, hang on, I spend my weekend with my arms around a woman, and you spend your weekends with your arms around some guy's hips, and I'm gay. This is probably why I had to learn to fight at the same time to learn to dance. But so he I can't remember the exact story, but it was certainly, he just sort of said, just go once and see how you like it and that sort of stuff.
And did he dance himself?
My mother was a dancing teacher before they met, and actually when their marriage broke down, my father learned to dance. It's the ironies of relationships, isn't it? And he encouraged me to do it for whatever reason, but it was something that I'm really glad I did because I do a lot of public speaking these days. Yeah. And if I hadn't sort of cut my teeth in terms of large crowds and some cases dancing in front of 5,000 to 10,000 people.
You still dance?
Oh, no, my knees are shot now. So I dislocated my kneecap dancing, believe it or not. Back in those days, I didn't have physiotherapy, and let's just say there's no dancing left in me.
That is a really fascinating story. And I don't think I have actually met anybody else who had ballroom dancing championships. I think that's really cool. Now
it was very popular, it made me very popular at weddings, and it was more of an asset than a liability, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, look, I can imagine. I love to dance. I don't do ballroom, but I've done my fair share of Latin and Ciroc. So yeah, I know that space a little bit. So let's talk about being an entrepreneur. Do you think you've always been one at heart? I mean, what were you like as a kid?
My father ran his own business, and we used to do business over the dinner table. And my ambition was always to run the family business. When I left school or left university, and I didn't actually get there until I was about 29, 27. I might have been 27. because I wanted to sort of not. I think one of the mistakes you can make when you have a family business is that you go into that and that's all you learn.
Yeah.
So I went in there, I was about 27, 28, and I love business. I mean, I used to read business books and whatnot when I was 14, 15. And I think that's one of the things I love about what we do these days is you really get intimate with companies and their business challenges and that sort of stuff. So would you call me an entrepreneur? Back in my early days, probably not. Would you call me a dedicated budding junior businessman? Absolutely.
And what was the family business? What was that thing that your dad was doing?
He started a business called Tom's Tires, and as I said, I'm from Perth. Back in when he started that business, there was someone who revolutionised the grocery business called Tom the Cheap Grocer, which is why he stole the name Tom's. So we had 27 stores that were in part company owned and franchised. And we had 27 stores, 29 stores, a couple in Darwin, 3 or 4 in Melbourne, and the balance spread right throughout Western Australia. And that's actually how I joined the company when they expanded into Victoria. And I joined the company, moved over to Victoria, and sort of set up the business there. We bought out a small chain of 3 stores, and sort of expanded it from there.
And you did a few. In a moment, we're going to talk about Powerful Points, which is your company that you run now. Before that, you had some great positions with some really well-known companies, and you also worked for the family company. So you were with the family company, you were with Cadbury Schweppes, Brown's Dairy, Red Rooster. Can you kind of piece that together for me and just give me a bit of a flavour of the journey that took you from reading business books as a 14-year-old through to working in the family business and elsewhere, and then finally landing up deciding to open Powerful Points?
I'll try and give you the short version of that. But you also, if you have ever seen, and if you haven't, you should see it, Steve Jobs' speech when he's speaking, I think, to the graduating class of one of the American, it might be Stanford University. And he talks about joining the dots. And he says that, only when you look back on your life can you join the dots to see the things that all led to where you were. And he talks about when he dropped out of university and he stayed in campus and started doing some of the art and design, and went to a couple of lectures on fonts. And if he hadn't done that, then the first Mac would have come out just with Courier New as a font and that sort of stuff. So I graduated from Curtin University in marketing, and back that stage, marketing just did not exist. Certainly in West Australia, there were no specialist marketing positions. So I moved over to Victoria and managed to get a job in the confectionery department of Cadbury Schweppes, and looked after these fabulous products called Caramel Koalas and Freddo Frogs. And
I remember them well.
you do not know what nice tastes like until you taste a Caramel Koala straight off the production line. It's just a unique experience. The work there, which was great training. I mean, I think everybody should get some exposure to large professional companies to learn the disciplines and learn what corporate means and that sort of stuff. Left there and did the trip around Europe. Came back, landed back in Perth. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. That's not in there because I got fired from the job. I was sold Yellow Pages for about 9 months. But sort of walked out of that and straight into being a brand manager for the dairy division of Peter's Ice Cream in WA, as it was at that stage, which was known as Brown's Dairy. And that was really good. I mean, but there were so many different products. There was white milk, there was yogurt, there was cheese, there was flavoured milk, there was cream, there was it was a really broad scope. I had something like 32 products, which on the eastern seaboard, one just does not do that, in a marketing position. But when you're in WA, you have a lot broader remit. And one of the challenges is we were certainly number 2 in the flavoured milk market, and I love the dairy industry. It's really sort of interesting to see what it's going through at the moment, which was exactly what I was going through when I was working there. It sort of goes through cycles, but they've done all these taste tests on their flavoured milk product versus the market leader's product, which was also a West Australian company at that stage, or they both are at that stage. And all the taste tests was all Coke and Pepsi thing. Taste test came back that their product was more preferred and that sort of stuff. And I, just came to this, what was a very production orientated company, and said, but obviously it does what it tastes like. Then doesn't make any difference if that's the case. So we needed to find a point of difference. And someone suggested to me, why don't you look at I think our boss suggested, why don't you have a look at putting in plastic bottles? And I did, and it was actually quite a technical challenge because light oxidizes milk.
All right.
So it's not just a matter of doing it, it's a matter of making sure that it doesn't go sour or bitter, and it can still be fresh but be bitter because the fat in it is oxidized.
So is it true that you were the first person to actually do that in Australia?
I might have been in the world. I'm not quite sure. I can't, but certainly in Australia. And as it was hugely successful. That's the thing that every product manager wants on their resume pretty quickly. Is like we increased the size of the market by 30%. Our market share jumped from 25 to 45%. And in 1984, it put $1 million on the bottom line in the first 12 months.
Lee, why was that? I mean, what was it about putting milk in a plastic bottle, a round plastic bottle, rather than a kind of a square traditional milkshake carton that made a difference for people?
A couple of things. Firstly, it looked cold. Milk cartons don't look or feel cold. Yeah. And this was in WA, of course. Number one. Number two, it was different. One of the things, there's so many lessons out of that. One of which is, and I tend to say that nobody needs another one of anything. In other words, so many marketers are me too. Yeah. And you don't want to be a me too. And this most definitely wasn't me too. So this moved flavored milk from milk to soft drinks. It shifted the segment in which it really operated from a consumer's point of view. And it really, one of the real lessons out of it was around pricing. It was actually a 30% premium over the cost of a milk carton, just because of the cost factor. I mean, at that stage, a milk carton cost about 2 cents, but by the time we took the bottle, the lid, the label was about 13 cents. Mm-hmm. So we cut the size down, we increased the price. I had big arguments with the salespeople as to whether it would sell or not. And it did, and the rest is history. And every time I walk into a supermarket now and I see those, I see the flavoured milk section, I'm proud of what I did.
I bet you are. That's really quite remarkable. There's one brand of milk that I can see in my mind right now. I can only see one, but I can see it in the chocolate flavour, the coffee flavour, and the yucky pink strawberry flavour.
The interesting part was we actually sold it back. So we sold the concept back to the New South Wales Dairy Corporation as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I very delightfully presented with my boss at that stage a photocopy, a colour photocopy of the cheque. You can imagine how hard that was to get, of the upfront royalty payment from the New South Wales Dairy Corporation, because it was just such a big thing from his point of view. So it was it was a delight to do that. But it was a huge learning exercise, a huge thing to say you've done, and good exercise all around.
And what happened next?
What happened next is they sent me on an educational around Europe for some new packaging, but Red Rooster contacted me and wanted to appoint me as the national marketing manager, and I was 26, and it was a very prestigious position to be the national responsibility for a major fast food brand. Yeah. And the money was very attractive, and so I took that offer and worked there for a relatively short period of time. I think it was less than 12 months, because I got an offer to join the family company, and the timing was right for that and that sort of stuff. So then I ended up moving to Melbourne and setting up a tyre company in Melbourne, and left there and went back to Perth and did marketing for the company there, and then became managing director. And then I realised that working with your family is not what it's made out to be.
And was it at that point that you started Powerful Points?
No, I left. I left the family company, which was a big step for me because it was something I'd always wanted to do. Yeah. And also ended a very significant relationship, and didn't want to hang around Perth. So looked at moving. I lived in Melbourne a couple of times. My family was in Melbourne. My best mate was in Perth. Was in Sydney, I should say. So I rang my best mate and said, coming over to see you. He said, great, for how long? And I said, forever, I think. And he was a bit gobsmacked with that because he wasn't expecting that one. And I got over just a little over, this is my 19th year in New South Wales. I got over on, I think it was about the 30th of April, Friday night, the 30th of April. And by Sunday, I knew I was going to stay in Sydney.
And you've been in Sydney ever since?
Pretty well, yeah. I've gone back a couple of times to Perth, and I travel a lot on business now, but Sydney is definitely home. So I was doing that, and a couple of things that, being a West Australian on what is relatively seen as a pretty untidy industry. The tyre industry is not known for its high-level sophistication of marketing and that sort of stuff. I actually struggled to get a job here.
Is that right?
Economy wasn't helping at the same time, and the type of job I wanted to stay in sort of management, and they wanted me to go back to marketing, but it was something that I just had done and didn't want to do anymore. And a friend of mine who was a tutor in health sciences at UTS had been asked to do a lecture, so she said, will I help her with a PowerPoint? And I said, yes, of course. And after I'd done that, she said, look, you're good at this, you should do this as a business. And I didn't know what I was going to do with my life and that sort of stuff. And literally I said to her, can you? And I looked around, and no one was doing it. There were a few people in the US. So I made a presentation in PowerPoint and converted it to HTML and put that up as a website. And I look back on it now and cringe, because when it came up, this huge trumpet blared and all sorts of awful things happened. But we probably all cringe about our websites back in the early noughties.
And things move on.
Well, they do, because it's funny, because I said to her not long after that, I said, I think this will only ever do about $10,000 a month. So I'll probably have to keep doing some lecturing and that sort of stuff. And so I'm a lousy business forecaster in that sense.
So a lot of people listening to this show will not know what Powerful Points does. And it was a really unique concept back then when you started it, and it's still pretty unique now. Can you just explain for me what the concept of it is? What does the company do? What problems do you solve for people?
So that's evolved over time. And one of the biggest challenges I had up until probably a couple of years ago was actually communicating exactly that. Mm. And sometimes you really need to get your message across. And this is where we are. This is where we're at these days. Sometimes you really need to get your message across. And even back then, people really need to get their message across. I had a background in marketing, and so I knew all about advertising and strategy and that sort of stuff, but I didn't want to do any of that. But I realised that PowerPoint had to change. Mm. You could see that the internet, we all forget how recent the internet is.
Yeah.
And in 2003, it was still fairly young in that sense, but it was quite obvious that the game was changing in terms of how people communicated and that sort of thing. So I just decided that I thought there was an opportunity there. And I had all of about $30,000, most of all of which was borrowed, and started doing a direct mail and telephone campaign, and spent all of that, and was starting to get traction right as the GFC hit. Which was, some people will tell you that you should start a business in a recession because it's always good for you. Well, those people don't know what they're talking about. But what we basically were about, and knowing what you offer is a really critical part for any business.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised the number of companies, even large companies, that are not really sure about what they offer. So we did upmarket presentations for people, more than just bullet points. And I'm not a designer, but I had a fair bit of design background, and one of those dots was a girlfriend who was an artist and fashion designer in the past, and she taught me about color and texture and that sort of thing. So I had the basics to be able to do the design, certainly not to the standard we have these days, and not to the standard that's expected these days. But back in 2003, 2005, it was okay.
Yes.
So we thought we help people get results, but we don't, because there's lots of things that will get people results out of a presentation. But we certainly do help them get their message across. And over that period, over the 15 years I've been running the business, that's one of the things that I've really got clear on, is that we have some particular IP that works in terms of getting that message across, whether that be in a presentation, whether that be in a video, and we're now just moving into augmented reality, because I believe that good use of augmented reality, and to a less degree, virtual reality, will help people get their message across powerfully and have people take action.
And just tell me, how do you define that difference between augmented and virtual reality?
So virtual reality is the headset stuff where the total environment is immersive. Augmented reality can be on a headset, but it's also available on telephones and like mobile phones. And you could be technically walking down George Street and put your phone up against, like look it up at Sydney Tower, and it could, if it was set up correctly, bring up information about, you know, when it was built and how tall it is. And so augmented reality literally does augment the reality that you're seeing, whereas virtual reality is a totally immersive environment.
So Pokemon on your phone might be a good example of that.
Perfect example of augmented reality. Yep. And really, and the technology, the hardware has been scrambling to catch up, and we've been trying to find uses for it. But we're pretty sure now that we've got some ideas of ways that it can help people get their message across.
So aside from using these new and emerging technologies, do you think that the business itself has changed very much in terms of what you do as it has grown, or has the central concept really remained pretty stable?
It has operational. I mean, all I could do when I first started was PowerPoint. I had no idea. I had to lie to get my first video job. In actual fact, if I waited until I knew stuff before I did anything, I'd still be doing presentations. One of the things you have to do is say yes and then work out how to do it.
I think that's one of the things that Richard Branson said, wasn't it? Every time he started a new business, clients would say, "Can you do this?" And he'd say yes, and then go away and figure it out.
Certainly a very true lesson. When I got my first video job, if you can call it that, it was a music company wanted to do a sales video flash, actually. And I didn't have any idea how to do that. And I was lecturing, and I didn't have any money either, as I'm sure every small businessman out there relates. So we had $5,000 to do this, which, when I look back now, it's like ridiculously cheap amount of money. But I went and I was doing some teaching at InSearch, and went to the head of their art and design department. Now, InSearch is an academic pathway. InSearch takes people and gives them a diploma so that they can enter UTS in second year. And I said, I need someone to do some flash. And he said, speak to this guy. And I spoke to that guy, and he said, I'm too busy because I have to do a hairdressing to pay my way. Speak to this girl. And I spoke to this girl, and she became my first employee in the end. And have a great relationship. She's now back in China. But it was a real learning experience for both of us at that point. I lost a fortune. I lost about $2,500 on the deal in the end. But again, one of those things that you just have to, as Branson said, do it and say yes, and then work out how you do it afterwards. Otherwise, you'll never grow. You'll never, you'll just be safe.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Let's talk about taking Powerful Points international. Now, we were talking before we started recording. You were saying that a lot of things had sort of just happened accidentally or randomly to you. Was the internationalization one of those random things, or did you think, I'll have a global business the day you started, or was there some particular point in time when you suddenly said, yep, now is the moment for us to become an international company?
So there's a couple of pathways that happen. So the girl that I just mentioned, Phoenix, was Chinese, and we spent a lot of time in the office talking to each other because she didn't have any family here and I didn't have any family here. And I passed the comment one day that, I'd like to take the business to China one day. This probably more of a passing, wistful thought than any particular major long-term strategy ambition. But she rang me up. I'm just trying to remember the sequence of events. A couple of things happened is that I got often, Ray Kroc, we do McDonald's. McDonald's is one of our biggest clients. And Ray Kroc once said, in order to be successful in life, and Ray Kroc was the founder of McDonald's and known for his insightful comments. He said, in order to be successful in life, a couple of things have to happen. Firstly, you have to be in the right place at the right time. And secondly, you have to do something about it. So this is going to be a long answer to how we ended up international, because there's a couple of things that go with it. I got a phone call one day from some guys at McDonald's in Australia who said, look, we're doing some training and we need to do a presentation at the end of it. would I help them do it? And I said, yes, of course. And I got halfway through it. They rang me up and said, Lee, we haven't got any money to pay you. We're not allowed to spend any money. And I said, okay. I said, because I was very much committed to getting brand names on my website. Because I just thought that added a level of prestige that you couldn't replace. So I said, okay. And I finished this job for them and put the McDonald's logo on my website. And about 6 months after that, I got a phone call from someone at McDonald's who said, how come you've got your McDonald's logo on your website? And I explained the story. And she said, well, okay. Our head of logistics in APME, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa, excuse me while I turn off my phone, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa needs to do a keynote at a biannual, every 2 years anyway, logistics conference, because she's head of that, and would I help her do the presentation? And of course she said yes. So we did that, didn't think much about it. 2 years later, she came back again and said, Simone wants to do the presentation again. She wants to do it for 5 other people as well. And I said, great, love to. And we sort of did that. And about 6 months after that, I got a phone call from the head of comms for APMEA based in Singapore, who said, we've been speaking to Simone and we know you do presentations, and every 2 years, McDonald's has a convention and each division needs to run its own presentation, spend an hour and a half updating everyone on what we've done. Would I work with them? And of course I said yes. And we did that, and it was a great job. The screen was 15 meters by 3 meters, I think, or 15 meters by 5 meters. So it was this huge canvas to work with, 15,000 people. And we did that. We were really proud of it. And the client came back afterwards and said, thank you for that. So we just blew away the rest of the world. Everyone's gobsmacked with the quality of our presentation. And it was at that moment I thought, you wonder where you were at sometimes on the quality of the work you do and how good you are and that sort of stuff. And that was one of those things to say, well, maybe we're a global, maybe we're a world-class company.
Yeah.
So that was just one of those real insightful moments about the business, or at least the potential of the business. And not long after that, the girl in China rang me and said, Lee, do you still want to go to China? I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, there's a place called Taicang, which is just out of Shanghai, is subsidising airfares if businesses want to go there and investigating going into business in the area. So I thought, oh, cheap trip to China. I've never been there. That'll be good. As it turns out, I went there beforehand. No, I didn't. No, I did take that trip. It was 3 days. It was in July the 8th. It was my first introduction to China in the middle of summer, which is something that I don't recommend. It was about 40 degrees and 98% humidity. Went through 3 shirts a day and that sort of stuff. As it turns out, we didn't go into Taicang, but I saw enough of China to just to say, let's give this a shot. At the same time, the head of McDonald's communications in APMEA had moved to the head of communications of McDonald's in Greater China. So we had business established there because we were doing a fair bit of business for her prior to that move. So we already had a revenue base coming out of China. And then obviously, and this is one thing we mentioned the other day, is that you have to have feet on the ground. You can't penetrate any market in a fly-in, fly-out. You can start there, but if you really want to get any depth or any traction, you need to have feet on the ground. So I started to look for someone to set up China and found a person who's been with me up until a couple of weeks ago when she wanted to take on some other things. And that's how we got into China. So we're halfway through the story. I hope I'm not boring you too much.
No, this is exactly, what I'm interested in finding out about.
So I have something I also recommend a lot of people have, and that is that I had an advisory board. Mm-hmm. And they said they saw the potential in the business, and they said, look, Lee, you need to do this. You need to expand this business, but you can't. It's like global expansion takes a big amount of money. You need to be well capitalized and truly profitable in order to take it on. And I certainly wasn't overly capitalized at that stage. So we spoke to a gentleman about how we could expand internationally, and he put together a licensor and a licensee model, mm-hmm. which starting with Australia, so to the model in Australia, which actually starts tomorrow. I just got off the phone call for the last bit of it. So we will be marketing actively for licensees who will be doing our sales and account service side of things. And we will be the licensor, so we will keep the studio and the trainers and whatnot centralized for quality control regions. And that's also a model that was set up so that it could expand internationally. The reaction we've had to it has actually been quite phenomenal. We've already had discussions with someone from Beijing who's a client of ours from a large company. And when I spoke to her about it, she said, look, I'd be really interested in talking to you about that. Another client we've spoken to in Shanghai is also interested. I'm going tomorrow. I'm heading to Asia to talk to another couple of people about Malaysia and Singapore and about Tokyo. So that's how the expansion is going to happen. So not everything has to be, we're a service-based company. Obviously, if you're a manufacturing company, it's different, but not everything has to be as you would expect it.
Yeah. So you've basically taken, you're doing an intellectual property transfer model of expanding, and that is, in a way, that's your stage 2, because you've already been in China for the last 3 years. Just taking me back a step, when you went and set up and had your staff member on the ground, how did you start out? What were those early months in China like? Were you up there full time? How were you actually getting your clients, apart from your big keystone client who was McDonald's?
She came down for a couple of months training. One of the things that most people don't realize about this business is what we call the craft. There's a lot to learn about what you can do and can't do and speak with authority about and that sort of stuff. In actual fact, it takes about 2 years to be able to, it's internalized to such a stage that you can speak confidently and with authority about everything that you talk to a client about. But it really was, China's such a big market, it's actually hard to invest in marketing there.
Yes.
It's even the most basic, and we would struggle to find anyone to digital marketing campaign starts at about $10,000. And so what we started with was just utilizing networks that we had, going to networking events, utilizing her network, utilizing my network, making contacts, coming out to see people, doing traditional sales calls, and in some cases cold calls. So it was literally the hard yards of setting up a business or starting any new business.
And what do you think was hardest? I mean, in these last 3 years when you've been really building the business in China, what has been the most challenging thing?
A couple of things. Firstly, having China in that sense is still about 10 years behind Australia in its understanding of the need for improved PowerPoint. We do a lot more video there. They're very switched on with video. So understanding the Chinese psychology about value. What we do find is that we have very loyal clients once we get them as clients because they see the value. That's number one. Number two, they will always ask for a discount.
Yes.
Because that's just part of the value equation for them.
Yeah.
And you have to you actually have to build that in. I remember I was having a meeting up there with a client once, and in front of his staff, he asked me for a discount. And it was always already on a good price for that. But I had to say yes. If I said no, he would have lost face and I would have lost the account.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that it's part of the culture that they're going to ask for a discount. It just is. Doesn't matter what price you give it to them. I'm thinking if you gave it to them for free, they'd ask you to pay them for it. So,
and I guess that's quite a difference, isn't it, for people coming from a Western perspective, where people will actually tell you straight up a price that is very close to the real price that they intend to ask for, because we are not culturally hardwired to haggle. If you go in not understanding that, you end up, you lose your margin before you even sort of
exactly
closing the deal. And that's a really, really important thing to know in terms of how you negotiate business. You have to go in there and build in something over and above what you think they're going to ask as for a discount.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other clever thing, well, I can't say clever, but I got a person who was an Australian national, but born in Shanghai and was educated at Melbourne University. And so she was very aware of the culture. I've always had a fear in business of thinking that how it works in Australia is how it works everywhere. And that is a big mistake if you make that. So understand the things that are not negotiable in terms of your value proposition and the things that you're going to do and that sort of stuff. And the rest of it you adapt culturally and socially and that sort of stuff. Otherwise you're destined to fail. You cannot force that stuff onto anyone, but particularly the Chinese.
Now, in the entrepreneurial business space, and especially in the international business space, there are always some things that don't go exactly according to plan, or that when you look back on, you think, could have done that in a different way. With the benefit of hindsight, looking back over the last few years as you've started, if you had to pick something that you wish you'd done differently, what would that be?
I would have picked another country.
What, an easier market?
Yeah, I would have picked Singapore if I was going to do it again. Singapore is very Western, and it's a Western city filled with Asians, basically. It's more prosperous. It's more forward thinking. You know, in hindsight, I should have expanded into Singapore firstly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's now look forward. You're using this franchise or franchisee model. As you go about looking for international markets to expand to, are you going to let that happen organically? Will you let people from all around the world just come to you and say, we want to take on this licensing agreement, this franchise agreement? Or are you going to look at specific markets and target specific places in the world?
We are a couple of things. We're targeting Asia firstly, because it's geographically okay. The last thing I want to be doing is flying right around the world from Europe to the US to China and try and do all of this. So we're sort of moving west, so to speak.
Yes.
At the same time, the critical part of this is getting the right people.
Yes.
You know, it would kill the business if we raced out to sell a license. So it's a license or licensee model, not a franchise or franchisee, at the risk of sounding pedantic.
No, that's okay. That's an important clarification.
Yeah. And you have to find the right people. So that would be the driver of it. You would crucify the business long term to be in a rush to say we can't do Thailand yet, but we can do Japan because, you know, it's not in the plan. I mean, as they say, you know, there's never a line in any business plan that says opportunity.
Yes.
So you have an idea and you go with it. If we get the right person, someone that we think is a really good fit for us culturally and philosophically, about how they want to run a business, how they want to treat their staff, how they want to treat their customers, how they look at the long-term view of the business, then we will look at that. But we'll market actively around Southeast Asia to start with.
And if I was to ask you, what would you deliberately avoid? Would it also be something in that people space?
Can I get more clarification on the question?
Well, I've said, you know, what are you looking for as you go to markets? And you've said, you know, you don't really want to be going all around the world, but you're not going to shut somewhere down if you find somebody who is a great partner, who is on the same page and shares your vision and values. But if you're thinking about ruling markets or potential partners or potential licensees out, what kind of things are you as a business steering away from?
This is a long-term business. This is like, we're telling people you will lose money in the first year. So I'm not looking for someone who's out to maximize their profit by selling licenses. I want them to maximize their revenue by selling our services to clients.
Yes.
So anyone that's in a sort of get rich quick scheme, I'm not interested in talking to them. I am also passionate about making sure that our three benchmarks, three things we do well: training. We train people exceptionally well because we only use people who have walked the talk, so to speak, in the training. So when they stand up there and talk, they're not reading from a manual, they're sharing their experience. They're reading from a manual as well, but there's a great deal of experience that goes behind that. We're passionately committed to the quality of our design work. That's one of the things we've built in fairly strongly. And thirdly, we have a really good account service model. Mm. We know that works. We get feedback from our clients all the time that our account service model works well. So those three things are equally important. They are the essence of who Powerful Points is. So we would avoid anyone that didn't sort of recognise that. You don't buy a license and then go and reinvent the wheel.
No.
So yeah, those are the things. That's really the thing that crosses anyone out, is not being sort of similar values around those sorts of things.
Okay. And I think that's I think that's really it's an interesting point, but it's a great model that you've got, where you don't have to reinvent the wheel now to expand the business, and you can really choose who you want to bring in to be part of that, that venture that you're growing.
Look, we're real clear our IP works. We're real clear that we overlay our processes on the challenges that a client faces in his communications. It works, and that we did a recent survey, and 89% of our clients said we made a significant difference. Not just a difference, a significant difference. So we know it works.
Yes, that is a great stat. Tell me, I just want to ask you one more question on Powerful Points and your clients before we do a little bit of a turn in direction. Thinking about the clients that you've worked with thus far, apart from, and just focusing on the fact that most of those overseas clients have been in China, apart from the fact that China is behind Australia in its appreciation of the need for great visual comms and great PowerPoints, what have you found the biggest, and leaving aside the fact that people want to bargain you down, what are the biggest differetions that you've found between your clients here in Australia and your clients in China?
There are a couple of points on that. Firstly, we deal with clients in the UK, the UAE, the US, even New Zealand, Hong Kong, Singapore. They're the ones I can think of off the top of my head. So we deal with a lot of them. We've got quite a good one. The biggest single thing between China and Australia and what we do is that if you say to someone in Australia, you shouldn't have a lot of text on your slides, or your visuals should be neat and clean, they'll go, yeah, I know that. And I agree with that. And in China, they'll go, no, it needs to be more on there. You need to have more information on there. And actually, I was quite shocked when I first experienced that. That is, and I joke and say that, they do that because they feel they get the designer to work harder, so therefore they get better value. But that is actually the mentality there, and it's in a Western world, it's quite counterintuitive that you would think that, and it actually is not conducive to good communications. Even in China, to have a lot of stuff on the slides or even in the videos is not good communications. But that's the biggest difference is that they like clutter visually.
And so how do you talk people out of that so that you can create something that actually works?
Well, that's part of the account service process, and that's part of explaining and educating clients. I mean, one of the things you really need to do is to educate clients, particularly in our business, and you just need to educate them as to why that's the case, and talk to them about the physiology of how we absorb information and the psychology of how we absorb information. And we can prove that works across cultures. It's a human condition, not a cultural condition.
I want to take a bit of a jump now, and I want to switch back really to talking about you as an entrepreneur and a business leader. What is it that motivates you? What gets you out of bed every day to face up to that, sometimes challenging task of running your own thing?
My creditors.
Anything else?
A couple of things. Firstly, you've got to do something. You might as well do something that's when I was, my personality is such that I like to take things on that most sane people wouldn't. So I think that's part of what drives me. Secondly, this is a really unique opportunity for many, many organisations in that you can if you look at what's happened in the past 20 years, to become a multinational was a long, slow, laborious process that might take 100 years. These days, you've got companies like Instagram's only sort of around for 2 years and sells for $19 billion. So it's a little bit of a game that I play. It's an opportunity to make a difference. I think we really can do something about ridding the world of death by PowerPoint. I figure if I ridded the world of Australia of death by PowerPoint, they'd put a statue to me over my.
That'd be great public service. So, Lee, what's your leadership style? How do you describe that?
I think a manager's job is to point out the objectives that you need people to achieve. Make sure they're equipped and skilled to be able to achieve those, and then spend your time getting the things out of the way that stop them achieving those. So I don't like micromanaging. I tell my staff, apart from there is a start time and there's a long history as to why there is that start time, I don't monitor their start and finish times. If they need to take time off, as long as that's not interfering with what they need to get done in terms of to go to the dentist or something like that, that's fine. I don't monitor whether they make up that time. We have lunch together every Friday, which I pay for. If I might go out once a month for staff birthdays, and we'll go out to a restaurant every other time. We'll buy in, and that might be anything with pizza to Indian or whatever. But I think that just helps to build a culture and have people feel part of a team. It's not all of that. I've certainly made some mistakes in that area over time as well, mind you. But my management style is definitely people want to contribute. If you select the right people want to contribute and make a difference. And your job as a manager is to harness that and focus that in the areas where they can make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I really agree with that, actually. So sometimes, obviously, things get tough in business, and I'm sure there are some days when you are facing a difficult situation, or you have a tough decision to make, or you stayed up all night worrying about something that went wrong. What strategies and resources have you developed over time, to deal with these hard times and to maybe to get yourself unstuck if you're kind of stuck with a decision or something's not working? What do you actually do? And I mean in a very practical sense. Do you go out and run around the block, or do you do 50 push-ups, or do you do yoga or meditate, or what's that process that you go through to get unstuck?
I don't do anything like that. I'm just you've probably given me some good tips of what I need to do. I'm a thinker. So I will probably wake up at 2:00 in the morning and that will be running through my mind. So I have to do things to get that out of my mind. Usually that means going out and turning the TV on and falling asleep in front of the TV at 2:00 in the morning or something like that. I tend to be a very direct person, and if there's something that is an issue, I will communicate it, talk about it, take action about it, whatever I really need to do to make it work. It's interesting. Life is not a TV show, which these people always seem to have the right answers at the right time and that sort of stuff. And you agonize over decisions. Yeah. I've agonized over a staff decision for some time, and often that's a mistake. I should act quicker, but sometimes you just agonize over decisions and you don't know the answer, but what you do know is that the status quo is not going to work. Yeah. So you've got to change something.
So do you have a tip for people on that? Is it about, I don't know, is it about acknowledging reality and coming to a conclusion about what you have to do to change that if things aren't working, or?
Well, yeah, like if there's a problem, recognize it and do something about it. Don't whinge and bitch about it.
Yeah.
Don't bitch behind someone's back, somebody who can't do anything about it. And this is also, it means to employees as well. You talk to someone who can do something about it, or talk to the person that's concerned, and from a sense of not blame, but a sense of like, let's address this problem. Yeah. Not like I'm trying to make you wrong for something, but let's fix the problem.
Yeah. So constructive kind
of. Yeah. I'm a communicator. I think, well, funny I'm in communications, isn't it? But my natural way of being is to talk about something, and I'll talk about anything. I don't have a problem with talking about something. I don't like most people, I don't like conflict.
Yeah.
So I never try and talk things from a conflicting point of view. But then again, I'm a strong personality, and sometimes it's happened like that. Not physical conflict, but let's just say we've both argued strongly from our positions.
Now, I want to know about books or people. I mean, we were talking at the start of this chat about the fact that you love to read and that you have been reading business books for most of your life. I'm keen to know, are there favorite books of yours? They don't have to be business books, but have you got favorite books who have inspired you on your journey? I mean, it could be people. Some people don't like to read books, so they prefer to chat about people who've inspired them. But seeing you love books so much, I thought I'd ask you about books.
My father recommended to me when I was very young, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
Which I obviously I read but didn't pay much attention to when I look at some of my life experiences. But yeah, that would be a good one. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And these are all, it's interesting, these are all traditional ones. There's a couple of books whose names I can't remember, but I can't remember the name of the author. One was Getting to Yes.
Yes. Urian Fisher.
Oh, well done. Which I thought was a great book. A couple of the books by the Pink Brothers, which was, again, I can't remember the exact titles. I don't tend to carry that information in my head. I carry it in my iPad. But Dan Pink is good stuff. In regards to stuff that's about our craft, there's a couple, but again, I should have gone and checked which ones they were, but just about behavioural psychology and that sort of stuff. It's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And people, is there anybody in particular in your life who you look at and think that person has really inspired me in what I've done?
The world, I've never been one for hero worship. And that's not to take away from like incredibly successful people, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, or those sorts of things. But I've never modelled myself on them.
Yes.
I just, for whatever reason, it just hasn't been and could be wrong. I'd probably be a lot more successful, I suppose, if I had. Each of them teaches you lessons, and you learn things from them. But you must reflect and run your business as you are. So, as I said, there are lots of people who I have a huge amount of respect for, but I have no one that I would say I'm the hero. They're my hero, or that sort of thing.
Okay, let's talk about the future. What's next for Powerful Points?
Well, the next is obviously our expansion overseas through our licensing, and we've got some big challenges around that. But I'm really excited about that. To be quite honest, I hope to have the business on the market in 5 years. Mm-hmm. At that stage, I would have been doing it for 20 years, and I think that's how long you get for murder. So,
and what will be next for Lee Featherby once you actually achieve that goal? What should you do after that?
What I'd like to do, I love speaking publicly.
Yeah.
Again, not surprising, I end up in this business. But what I would like to do is become a keynote speaker. Uh-huh. And travel the world with Sandy, my partner, and basically use that as a way to see the world and talk to people about what we're talking about now to some degree, either about the importance of good presentations, how to do a good presentation, things around that, or things around running your own business, running a small business, creating a big business. I have started putting together something which is a sort of keynote called 10 Things I've Learned About Business. Uh-huh.
It sounds like a lot of fun to travel the world and keynote speak.
Yeah, it is. Some people get to do it for a living these days, and I'm not one of them. I do travel, as I said, I do travel quite a lot. Don't travel much with Sandy at the moment, but that would be nice. But I there's 20 years doing this, and you've got to hand it over to somebody somewhere, and that sort of stuff. But hopefully it'll leave behind an institution that will last for some time.
Yeah. What would you like the legacy of that to be?
What would I like the legacy of that to be? I just would like to have been a business that made a difference to people in terms of not only about how they speak publicly, but the belief they have in themselves about their ability to speak publicly. I'd like it to be an organisation that the staff say, I'm really glad I worked there.
Yes.
And the licensees and licensors, I'd like them to say the same thing. I could sum it up in this sentence. Is that when you're talking to someone and they mention powerful points, they go, that's a really great company.
Yeah, I think it's a great sentiment.
So yeah, if I heard that, I'd be happy.
How can people get in touch with you?
They can look at our website, www.powerfulpoints.com.au or .com.cn if you're listening to this in China.
Uh-huh.
And that would be the easy way. They can email, probably easiest is info@powerfulpoints.com.au. If they have anything particularly around a presentation question or something like that they might want to challenge, I'm happy to try and deal with those. That's lee@powerfulpoints.com.au.
And we will put all that onto the show notes so that people can easily find it and they don't have to scribble it down now. What would be your final thought for business owners who are listening to this show and thinking about whether or not it's possible for them to take their company international?
If you can do it, but it's going to take a huge amount of energy and a huge amount of money and a huge amount of time, and do your due diligence and make sure you're going there with something that's different. Don't go in there just because, don't try and sell eggs into China unless you've got special eggs, something. Just make sure you've got something, a value proposition that holds up, that you can speak confidently about, that is different from what other people do.
Lee, it's been fascinating talking to you. I found out lots and lots of extra, really super interesting stuff we started this conversation. So it's been great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I hope it's made a difference to some people.
So that's it for today and for this year from me. If you've enjoyed today's episode, remember to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. And if you're aspiring to take on the world by storm with your business and you need a little bit of help, check out internationalbusinessaccelerator.com. You can find blogs, ebooks, this podcast, and information about the accelerator itself at that site. So the link again is internationalbusinessaccelerator.com. Have a really happy Christmas, everyone. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, a great summer break. I look forward to seeing you next year.